Story 1. Some battles are not worth fighting. I need to hold my tongue in certain situations. I used to be brutally honest and argue points just on principle, but not anymore. Story 2. Life goes on. It is incredibly hard at times to accept this, but it is important to remind yourself of this fact whenever life presents you with difficult and hurtful experiences. They too shall pass. Story 3. If you are in a situation you do not like, whether it is a job, city, relationship, or other circumstance, it will not improve on its own. You need to walk away from or change the situation, even if it is painful and difficult. Story 4. Abuse is never to be tolerated, even if the abuser is working on themselves. Story 5. When someone shows you or tells you who they truly are, believe them. There is usually a reason they are warning you. Sometimes it stems from insecurity, but most of the time it is a genuine warning, and if they give one, believe it. Story 6. Honest and open communication is the secret to a healthy relationship with a spouse or a romantic partner. Do not be afraid to express your feelings. Story 7. Kinda joking, kinda not. The first marriage can end up being the practice run. Now, I know what I actually like in a person after having the experience under my belt and happen to be older and wiser. Story 8. Discipline surpasses motivation. It took me years to realize that showing up is more important than feeling ready. Story 9. Cooking for yourself is much cheaper and generally healthier. The only difficult part is that it took me 40 years to learn this. All that money spent. Story 10. Nobody else cares about what you wear, drive, or eat. Stop comparing yourself to others. Story 11. Emotional spending can be very detrimental. I had to file for bankruptcy at 20 because I didn't know how to manage the freedom of adulthood. That experience made me much better with money afterward. Story 12. Don't let your ego or your morals outweigh your instinct for self-preservation. Don't sacrifice yourself to keep someone else comfortable. Story 13. Is your boss or company treating the staff poorly? Find a new job quickly. It is unlikely to improve. Story 14. Whichever outcome occurs, whether desired, undesired, or completely unanticipated, cannot dictate my self-esteem, mood, or emotional well-being. I will be okay regardless. Story 15. People do not change no matter how optimistic you are. I have had to walk away from individuals because they were difficult. At times, you must prioritize yourself, as some people will continuously take without giving. Story 16. I'm over 40. Just this year, I learned there are things I can't control, and that's okay. Let it go, and I'll be happier. Story 17. My unpleasant mother is a classic example of a selfish narcissist. However, I am grateful to have a prime example of the type of wife, mother, and future grandmother that I do not wish to become. Story 18. I realized when I was talking to my therapist this past week that I had been the default adult my entire life. As the eldest daughter and granddaughter, I was the free babysitting option. One example was when my mom placed restrictions on what car I could have due to that obligation. My dad wanted me to have a Miata, but my mom refused to allow anything that was a two-seater because I needed to be able to drive my siblings around. Unfortunately, the entire experience of being the eldest taught me that I was worth less than what I could provide. This carried into my relationships. All my ex-partners were mama's boys. I did all the emotional labor and with my ex-husband, physical labor as well. Nothing would get done around the house unless I constantly nagged or just gave up and did it myself. He would get very upset when he asked me where I wanted to eat, and I said I do not care. I genuinely do not care. I will find something I enjoy on whatever menu. I just wanted, for one moment, not to have to make any decision. I lost so much enjoyment from the little things when I was in that marriage. Everything had to revolve around him. Otherwise, he would have a meltdown and I would revert back to needing to be the adult. However, he did teach me an important lesson about setting my own boundaries and not being afraid to say no. When you're finally done people-pleasing those who cannot be pleased, your life becomes so much bigger. As someone who never had that kind of freedom before, it truly feels like the world is my oyster. Story 19. People are allowed to change their minds. You can be deeply in love one year and not feel the same the next. Accept that and move on. Don't suffer by overthinking questions like, how can they say they love me and now want to break up? People change. Story 20. Your coworkers are not your friends. Make small talk, but do not confide in them about anything important, and avoid complaining. Keep your head down and engage when necessary, but do not let anyone know how you really feel. Story 21. There is a significant difference between living your life to the best of your ability and trying to conform to what you think your partner wants. In the end, you are only responsible for your own well-being, so focus on self-improvement, and everything will fall into place. Story 22. Helping others truly contributes to creating purpose in life. However, it is equally important to separate yourself from those who do not reciprocate and direct that energy towards more positive endeavors, such as personal growth. Story 23. Do not send an email when you are angry. Ask about how people are thinking and feeling rather than assuming you know. Share your thoughts and feelings instead of assuming others know them. What I often reflect on is the quote by Richard Bach: "Argue for your limitations, and sure enough, they are yours." I spent much of my teens and 20s telling myself that I could not do various things without even trying. I am not sure when or why my perspective changed, but one day I realized my love for science, which relies on testing hypotheses to form evidence before stating something is true. However, I had been very unscientific about my capabilities. To summarize, I returned to school in my mid-20s, earned a doctorate, and began my career 10 years later than I could have. Yet, I eventually reached my goals. Story 24. Don't ever date someone you work with or who is your neighbor. If the relationship goes south, are you willing to quit your job or move? I definitely learned the hard way. Story 25. I didn't change the oil in my first car long after it was due. It damaged my engine, and the repair costs were more than the car was worth. I will never neglect car maintenance again. Story 26. You cannot always trust the first information you receive about a subject. You need to be willing to examine the issue from different perspectives and think critically about it. Story 27. I dislike bills, so seeing a car payment affect me every 2 weeks led me to decide that any car I get, I will just buy outright and be done with it. Story 28. You don't realize what terrible parents you had until you have children of your own. I defended my parents to questioning relatives for years before I understood they were nothing but worthless. Story 29. Most people at your workplace are not your friends. No matter how friendly they seem, keep your personal information to yourself. Story 30. Keep quiet about your adult children. Allow them to live their lives, make mistakes, and learn. This does not apply if their safety is at risk, but for other matters like career or relationship choices, refrain from intervening. Story 31. You have to love yourself first. Not because if you don't, no one else will, but because if you don't, it won't matter if others do. If you do love yourself, you won't care if others don't. That last point is still a work in progress, and of course, you can only get so far. The point is, you have no control over others and how they react to you. Therefore, you have to love who you are with or without them. Story 32. It is not healthy to be in a romantic relationship where there is an unequal amount of interest or passion. I have learned that it needs to be balanced. Otherwise, it feels as though the person is completely dependent on you for their happiness, or you constantly wonder where you stand. Neither situation is tolerable or healthy in the long term. Story 33. 1. It doesn't matter who you are, what you do, how much you try, or how hard you try. You cannot make everyone love you. The only person you are guaranteed to be with forever is yourself, so you better learn how to get along with you. Story 34. Sometimes the best path forward is to go backward. I returned to community college at a much older age than most students. Despite the initial embarrassment, I was able to accomplish something truly wonderful. Story 35. Alcohol can take over your life if you allow it. I am grateful for my experience, as it brought me to a point of realization about my lack of control. Tomorrow marks 11 months of sobriety. Story 36. Don't let your friends pressure you into doing something you do not want to do, especially if it is illegal. Your friendship will likely survive, and you will avoid the consequences you know you would face if caught. Story 37. If you are in a difficult situation and have the opportunity to change it, take action. Do not remain passive when you can do something to improve your circumstances. Story 38. My last conversation with my mom ended when I threw my phone at the wall. I was throwing a temper tantrum, to be honest. I had no idea that would be the last time we spoke, and I never got to apologize and tell her I loved her. I am now much more careful about what I say and how I say it. When I am in the wrong, I apologize as soon as possible. Story 39. Don't say or think cruel things out of anger. As a teenager, I resented my father so much that I didn't even care if he died. Just a few months later, he was admitted to the hospital for months. Story 40. When you have an important meeting or similar and you can't calm down, watch something like a movie or play something that is funny. Story 41. Hope and drive are useless without action. I was stuck in a toxic environment and I just stayed. I kept thinking that one day a chance to change it all would come and I would take it without hesitation. So I waited for that chance. It took me almost 5 to 7 years to realize it would have been better to create the chance myself rather than wait for it. Story 42. Growing up without a father, I often attended sports tryouts alone, participated in school events, and tried to learn skills like working on cars, hunting, and dating. Now that I am a father, I strive to be present for my children no matter what. I constantly ask myself what I would have wanted from a father and aim to embody those qualities. Story 43. Have empathy in relationships. Many people believe they do, but what I mean is this. Every few days, take a moment to consider how your partner feels and what they are experiencing. Reflect on what it is like to be a human in their life. Ask them how they perceive the relationship and how you can improve your support. This lesson could cost you the love of your life. Do not allow that to be the price for learning it. Story 44. You can love people just as much from a safe distance. This was the valuable lesson that allowed me to stay away from unhealthy relationships. I could leave and continue feeling love while also there was less grief in the parting and much more emotional health. Story 45. That your children outliving you isn't a guarantee. I'm not grateful that my son drowned, not at all, but I am grateful that I was very close to him and that our relationship was excellent up to the day he died. If we had had a fight or if I had been a poor parent, I would be racked with guilt, but I'm not. I'm relieved that we were very close and that I was involved in his school, sports, and activities. It said that the harder your heart breaks when someone dies, the stronger the bond was. I'm heartbroken and will be forever, but I'm grateful for having had such a special son who was liked by everyone. Taylor, Forever 17. Story 46. When things get tough and you are looking for help, no one will be there for you except your family. Story 47. Never trust your best friend. Your best friend can turn into your worst enemy with the information they have on you through confiding. Story 48. It was when I stopped eating completely for a year when I was 13. I was skinny and stayed in the hospital, but now I am 36 and food is not that important in my life, which means I am not addicted to it. Story 49. It is perfectly okay to open up on a deep emotional level with your partner. Holding everything in due to fear and insecurity will harm both you and the relationship in the long run. Story 50. You do not get to live in multiple versions of your life forever. Eventually, one of them collapses, and it is usually the one you do not expect to lose. Story 51. Life is beautiful, messy, and complicated. Sometimes it doesn't look the way you think it's supposed to, and that is okay. Story 52. Don't drink so much. You're too flirty when drunk. I went to a friend's house party at the end of summer the year I graduated from high school. It was a bring your own alcohol and mix sort of deal. I didn't particularly like the taste of beer, so I brought vodka and a big jug of orange juice for people to make screwdrivers. No one made them except me. They all drank beer instead. I didn't want to take my stash home, so over the course of the night, I nearly finished it. During the night, I successfully flirted with a former high school crush. I even made out with her while we danced on the driveway. But that was earlier in the evening before I drank half my vodka on my own. Later, I found my dance partner from earlier. She was in the basement with some friends watching a movie. I picked up where we left off, and we had a nice little kiss right there in front of my friends. But I was bold. I was drunk. I didn't care if they were telling me to stop. I felt good, and my high school crush was very much into it. She was grabbing my back, pulling me close, and driving her tongue down my throat. Felt magical, except for the fact that it was the sister of the first girl, the younger sister, still in high school, just 17 years old and turning 18 in 6 months. I didn't realize it. I had to break the kiss to go to the bathroom, and my best friend intercepted me and told me the news. I was devastated and utterly embarrassed. I made drunken apologies to both girls. The younger one was very forgiving. The older one, even in my inebriated state, I could tell was upset. So I said my goodbyes, grabbed my bike to try and ride it home, only to walk straight into a tree. My friend's dad drove me home, and I fell asleep on a lawn chair in the front yard. I never got drunk again. Story 53. You do not need to involve yourself in every conversation. I mean that honestly. My wife and my son were arguing about holes in his socks, and I jumped in to try and mediate. The truth is, it had nothing to do with me. That is a tame example, but makes me evaluate more situations and consider if I need to get involved. Story 54. Getting out of debt requires two things: good discipline and time. You cannot achieve it without both, without relying on an unpredictable windfall. Story 55. The extracurricular activities my parents encouraged me to participate in as a child turned out to be really useful. I was quite difficult back then, but I am grateful for them now. Story 56. You are a villain in someone's story, no matter how kind or wonderful you believe you are. Sometimes it serves as a good wake-up call because we may not be as introspective as we should be in all relationships, especially regarding how younger family members may perceive or judge you. Being able to move forward without being liked by everyone is also a valuable skill to have. Story 57. There is no one-size-fits-all solution to being an adult. If anyone approaches you claiming they have one, be cautious. I was convinced to join a pyramid scheme shortly after starting college. It took me years to see through the indoctrination, and it cost me thousands of dollars. Story 58. The personal ego and the belief in a separate self are mental activities that many people mistake for their true selves. Living constantly in the belief that this projected persona is real leaves no conscious attention or value available to recognize that our true being is more than that. We are the consciousness that observes all experiences, and it is to this understanding that I have become present. Although this may seem to be what is happening, there is nothing worthwhile being said. Story 59. People change based on their life situations, so develop a thick skin and don't take things personally. Story 60. Being in a relationship isn't everything. Life with the wrong person can be far worse than life alone. Story 61. People pleasing will never get you anywhere. I have learned to not overstep my boundaries and call people out when I know they are taking advantage of my kindness. Story 62. The boy you thought you would marry has caused significant mental damage and will never change until he realizes the consequences of his actions. I now know that I deserve better, and since I am not receiving what I deserve in a relationship, it's time to leave. Story 63. A pebble a day builds a mountain. Stop worrying about what others might say. Focus on what brings you meaning. Story 64. An honest man can take years to recover from a relationship, while a woman often only needs to find someone else to move on. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.